Hey everyone. So we're going to talk about something kind of rough today. So I'm just going to say quick content warning. We're going to talk about some bills and things that are happening. And I want to make sure that everyone's taking care of themselves. So watch this video, please. That'd be great. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. But take it in small bites if you need to. It's not going to be that long, but we want to talk about a couple things. So I want to talk about Arkansas Bill, House Bill 1570. What this says is, Arkansas legislators are racing to pass a wave of discriminatory legislation targeting transgender Arkansasians, and especially trans youth. House Bill 1570 would prevent healthcare professionals from providing or even referring transgender young people for medically necessary healthcare. It would bar any state funds for gender-affirming healthcare for transgender people under 18, and it would allow private insurers to refuse to cover gender-affirming care for people of any age. We'll go on, but we'll get back to how this is disgusting. Doctors who have provide medically necessary care to trans youths would risk losing their licenses and be subject to lawsuits by individuals and state. So this is from the ACLU. I like some of their work. I used to be a member. Haven't re-upped because I'm poor. Their take. HB 1570 is one of the most extreme and harmful anti-trans bills in the country. If passed and signed, it would be the most extreme piece of anti-trans legislation ever signed into law. Can't talk tonight. Here's what you need to know. House Bill 1570 puts vulnerable Arkansasians at risk. Denying best practice medical care and support to transgender youth can be life-threatening. It has been shown to contribute to depression, social isolation, self-hatred, risk of self-harm, and suicidal behavior, and more. Research shows after gender-affirming care and treatment, trans youth experience significant decreases in suicidal thoughts and improvement in overall emotional and behavioral health. This bill would take away options for trans youth, irreversibly forcing youth through endogenous puberty and undermine the prevailing recommendations of every major medical association. This is all true. This is all objectively true. No, absolutely, Ryan. They're happening all over. This is the one that I'm looking at right now, though, and the reason being is not to say the other ones aren't god-awful, but this one is fucking disgusting. We'll go on. I want to make sure everyone's really, really clear on what this is. House Bill 1570 undermines parents. The decision about what care is appropriate in a particular case should be left to the transgender youth, their parents, and their doctor, or therapist as well. This bill would punish supportive families. Parents would have to consider moving out of state or take on the expenses of a regular travel to a state that allows gender-affirming care for the child. Courts have ruled time and time again that patients and their parents, not politicians, have the right to make decisions for their parents. I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be really curious about this for case law. I feel somewhat insulated from this at the moment in Canada, but it's still super scary. Funky thought, absolutely. Absolutely. Gender-affirming care is not a process that trans kids and their families and their healthcare providers take lightly. It comes after years of careful consideration by children and families and months of even years of evaluation by healthcare professionals. Despite the emphasis on medical care in the media reports on transgender adults, gender transition for children who have not reached puberty is entirely a social process. This might include using a different name, wearing different clothes, and using different pronouns. Subsequent care for minors simply delays puberty to give a young person and their family more time to make informed medical decisions. This is what we use with blockers. Hormone therapy does not typically begin until the person reaches at least age 16, which is true, and no gender-affirming surgeries are performed at least till 18. Yeah. So every time you see TERF saying they're giving young girls surgeries, they're lying. Ask for evidence, because they're actively lying. This does not happen. There's no girls being, turned into trans men at age 14. There's no trans girls that are getting a boob job at 13. It's not happening. It's just not. Leading medical organizations oppose House Bill 1570. Yes, because WPATH and many other organizations, including the APA, both of them, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Pediatric Endocrinology Society. Jesus Christ, there's so many names on here. The AMA, among others, have all voiced opposition to the law and the policies like this. Those organizations cite research demonstrating negative outcomes, including increased suicide rates for trans youth who don't have access to gender-affirming healthcare. Conversely, gender-affirming healthcare leads to a number of positive effects, including improvement to body image and overall psychological well-being, and importantly, reduces suicidality. So this is horrifying, right? Like, can we all agree that this is absolutely horrifying? I'm going to post this link in chat. Oh, can't do it because it's too big. Damn. All right, well, just look up ACLU. That's fine. So I want to make this clear as to why we're talking about this. Well, one, it's horrible. So we're going to look at this because I want to make it clear that this has real demonstrable effects. The lawmakers in Arkansas are doing demonstrable harm to children. Remember, the reason why conservatives support pro-life legislation is because it's a very easy way to get votes, and because in utero children are the perfect minority. They don't ask for anything, they don't have any needs, they don't have anything that they want other than existence. And the fact is that sometimes people's existence is not helpful. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. Sometimes women have to do certain things, especially if something was forced upon them. Or they're just not ready for that part of their life. Sorry, but that's the breaks. The fact is that these people only care about this because it's a very easy thing to get behind. But you can see very clearly why they do shit like this. It's because they don't care about pro-life. They're not pro-life. They're pro-fetus. But they do shit like this incredibly disgusting stuff, because essentially what they find is that when they do shit like this, the trans people in reality get fucked. And in this case, saying that private insurers will not cover gender-affirming care for people of any age is just insanity. But to keep trans children from being able to take blockers, this is no different than the UK law in practice. And here's where this gets really problematic. If you look at, and you keep seeing me flash between these because I keep trying to look for them, the power of 41%, a glimpse into the life of a statistic. Abstract. 41%. The man said with anguish on his face as he addressed the author, clutching my handout, "We're talking about my granddaughter here." He was referring to the finding from the National Transgender Discrimination Survey, or the NTDS, that 41% of 6,450 respondents said they had attempted suicide at some point in their lives. The author had passed out the executive summary of the survey's findings during a panel discussion at a family conference to illustrate the critical importance of accepting transgender people. During the question and answer period, this gentleman rose to talk about his beloved 8-year-old granddaughter, who was in the process of transition socially to from male to female in her elementary school. The statistics that the author was citing were not just numbers to him, and he wanted strategically effective ones to keep his granddaughter alive and thriving. The author has observed that the statistic about suicide attempts has, in essence, developed a life of its own, and it has had several key audience academics and researchers, public policymakers, and members of the community, particularly transgender people and our families. This article explores some of the key takeaways from that survey and the ways in which the 41% statistic has affected conversation about the injustices of trans people, face, and the importance of family and social acceptance. So I will post this link in there so people can grab onto it. This will be at the bottom of the video. But I want to be really clear. All the states right now trying to do anti-trans legislation are trying to kill kids. Okay, awesome, Psychic. See you later. Love you. Thank you, love. Appreciate it. Trying here. I want you guys to understand this. We talk about how horrible these things are, but I don't know if everybody gets them. And I'm hoping that this video works with people to show them what's going on. Here's the Trevor Project. Landmark study finds 39% of LGBTQ youth or more than half of the transgender and non-binary youth reported having seriously considered suicide in the past 12 months. 2/3 of LGBT youth reported having that someone attempted to convince them to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. Yeah, so people try to convince us that we're not trans. 42% of LGBTQ youth who underwent conversion therapy reported a suicide attempt in their last year. LGBTQ youth who experienced discrimination relating to their sexual orientation or gender identity were twice as likely to attempt suicide. Now, I want to make one thing really clear here. I don't know if this is going to say this. I think Vosh has brought up the statistic too, but I want to make it really clear. We know from data that if a kid has at least one supportive parent, one parent who's willing to go out on a limb for them and understand who they are, suicidality drops. I believe the number given is to 1/17 of its original thing. Just one person supporting them can make all of the difference. This is why protecting trans kids is so fucking important here, is because they are incredibly susceptible. I work with lots of trans kids, many of them trans boys, and the fact is that this stuff really damages people. It really sucks. These are kids just trying to figure out who they are, and these types of behaviors, these law changes, are not there because they make sense. They're not there because they're medically sound. They're there for the sake of marginalization and atrocity. To be very clear, I still hold by my stance, and I will make this video at some point. I believe being conservative is a form of pathology. Now, notice I didn't say mental illness there. I know a lot of people get in trouble for saying conservatives are mentally ill. Mental illness is not necessarily an issue. I'm mentally ill in some ways. Some of you are mentally ill. Having gender dysphoria is a form of mental illness. It is what it is. But when I say pathology, I mean it hurts themselves and people around them. No one can inflict this level of pain on children and it be okay. Because unless they just are incapable of understanding, and I just can't believe that about every conservative, so I have to believe the cruelty is the point. They want to hurt trans people. You look at what Rand Paul said to Rachel Levine when she was being sworn in, and by the way, she handled that like a fucking champ. But to believe that this is in any way okay, to believe that this fucking insanity is in any way, shape, or form. Human Rights Campaign. New study reveals shocking rates of attempted suicide among trans adolescents. Study published in the American Academy of Pediatrics revealing alarming levels of attempted suicide among transgender youth, with the highest rates among transgender boys and non-binary youth. Correct. Yeah, Funky, exactly. Like, I don't think... I say this to my partner all the time, usually when I'm snuggling them. I do not think I could have transitioned without Zena in my life. Full stop. Like, I don't think I could have. And the reason being is that I was so scared of the implications and the fucking floodgate of shit that would come out that I legitimately needed someone there to give me that kind of support. And Zena has been that person. I don't know where I would be today if Zena wasn't here. Support is huge for us that are adults, and the fact is that they want to that this affects trans children even more so makes perfect sense. It's intuitively rational. It makes sense on a very deep level, because if you're a kid that's getting shit at school, shit from your friends at the baseball team, if you're getting shit from your soccer coach, having a single parent that can be there and hold you and be there for you is fucking amazing. It doesn't even need to necessarily be a parent. Sometimes it can be a fucking coach. It can be a mentor. It can be an older friend. It can be an adult sibling. It can be whatever. but just having someone there to support you is so fucking huge. In fact, we were just talking about this today, is like, if you were a non-binary person, let's say, and you were not big on being online, it stands to reason that you would have had a hell of a time finding connections. Because if you're from a small town, you kind of get fucked. If you're not a big online person, big on social media, big on forums, things like that, I've seen trans people who are in those who are feeling very validated, very, cared for. And it just doesn't... Yeah, it stands to me that, like, not having those resources affects people, especially if their parents don't understand or just aren't aware because the kid feels afraid is in the closet. Like, we'll go on with this, but I think it's making my point pretty well. More than half of transgender male teens who participated in the survey reported attempting suicide in their lifetime, while 29.9% of transgender female teens said they attempted suicide. Among non-binary youth, 41.8% of respondents state that they had attempted suicide at some point in their lives. Holy shit. More than half of transgender men, teens, male teens, 29.9% of female teens, transgender female. This is insane. What Arkansas is doing is a human rights violation. Let's be very clear. They are asking these kids to roll over and die. And there's not even hope for them when they turn 18. Because their private insurer can just say no. Now, to be very clear, this law may be voted in. It also is probably going to be struck down. The idea that Lambda Legal and the ACLU and numerous other organizations are going to fight this is insanity. And especially as the biggest part of the ACA making it very clear that there's no pre-existing conditions. The fact is I don't think this is going to land, but this is what they're trying. Conservatives want trans kids dead because they want them at some level to either succumb to normalcy, stop being an F-slur, and just either conform or die. That's what this essentially is asking. And the fact that these are so distorted among different types of trans people is fascinating and horrifying. Trans men having a higher rate over 50 makes sense. And this is my argument and logic. We have to remember that trans men, that is AFAB trans people, were socialized at some level in the wrong gender. That is female. They're not female, they are men. However, they were socialized inappropriately. We know from data from cis people that women, cis women, tend to attempt more often, but cis men tend to complete more often. I think the completion rate is like times 8 what it is for women. So the idea that transgender men are attempting suicide this often actually makes a lot of sense. Now, it's not saying completed, it says attempted. Now, I could say the same thing about trans women. Trans women were socialized generally as AMAB, assigned male at birth. As such, some of that socialization takes time to get out of the system. It's just how it works. So, stands to reason that they might attempt less, but I'd be curious what the completion rate is. Is it still higher as it would be for, say, like a cis guy? Now, I want to be very clear. There's people who are going to clip me out of fucking context and say that I'm saying that trans men are the same as cis women. They're not. But I want to be very clear that I don't want to completely get rid of the socialization argument because I think there's some useful stuff in there. Now, I think trans people's socialization is different than their cis counterparts because even if they are socialized into the wrong gender, there are ways that things don't stick. I can see this in myself. I can see this in other people anecdotally. There appears to be ways that some socialization sticks more than others. I've worked with trans boys who still do the overly caring for everyone to the sacrifice of themselves thing. And we've had to work that out and be like, but you're a boy. Stop it. You're in some ways making fun of the trope, but also trying to understand that like this has a real effect. So I want to be really clear about this. I think that explains some of these numbers. Now, I'd have to double check and do a little bit more research, but I want to be really clear this is the thing. The one that scares me here is non-binary youth. Holy shit. Because if you look at other research and show that, was it like 2/3 of non-binary people are AFAB? That makes sense with what we saw up here. Right? And explains why it's a little bit lower. Because if you combine these rates, you can probably see something of a similarity. Now, granted, I could be wrong on that, but that's intuitively what comes to mind. Many transgender young people experience family rejection, true, bullying, harassment, and feel unsafe for simply being who they are, which all increase are all added risk factors of suicide. Yeah. You can see the 2018 LGBTQ youth report. You can see all this stuff, including the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, Trevor's thing. And again, be really clear about this. If you are having suicidal ideations, please contact your therapist, go to the hospital, call one of these helplines, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the Trevor Project. Either one have 24-hour hotlines to call. The Trevor Project is really great. Trans Lifeline's another one. They're all in this article that I will post in the video.
A lot of these helplines you can also text if you don't feel like calling. I know the Trevor Project definitely has a text line.
Yeah. Just go to their website. Because the thing is that, like, that was, by the way, Zena's hiding back there, folks. But yeah, Zena's right. Like, there's just date. This is just true. Like, just is. Like, there are Zoomers out there that are really uncomfortable being on the phone because they didn't have to be on the phone like we did. When I was in the 90s, there weren't cell phones. Well, there might have been, like, shitty ones, but, like, no one had them. And so in the 90s, when I was a teenager, you just called everyone. And if they weren't home, you didn't get to talk to them. Now, people have direct access, and they have the ability to contact you directly. And so the thing is, I think a lot of people haven't had to have that socialization of being on the phone in the same way, which causes people, I think, to be more uncomfortable the younger they are. But they really prefer things like texting and Snapchat. So having access like that is really good. What is my point here? My point here is that Arkansas's law, right, is by every measure fucking awful. House Bill 1570 would prohibit doctors from providing medically necessary health care for transgender teens, which we know demonstrably causes increases in suicide. Because not having the care is going to force these kids to go through a wrong puberty. And there's going to be fucking transphobes who watch this and say, well, it's not the wrong puberty, it's the puberty they're supposed to go through. It's not true, sweetie. I'm sorry. I know you're trying, but it's not going to work. Because here's the thing. When you're talking about this effect, these kids are going to have to go through the shit that we all did. For all of us people that transitioned when we were older, this is stuff that was sort of there. We just had to figure it out. But if you're a kid that has the ability to actually, like, go through the proper puberty, if you're a trans girl that actually gets to skip all of the fucking laser and all the other crazy shit that we go through, God, that's such an amazing fucking thing for these kids. And, like, taking away all this shit, taking away the ability to block hormones, this is fucking awful. And the fact is that taking away older trans people or trans people in general's care or private insurers to take this away is insanity. It is already hard enough to get them to pay for fucking anything. If you go to the ACLU Arkansas's website, you can see that you can sign their petition. I probably will later. But I want to be very clear with people. Keep an eye on this, because this is the most aggressive of all of these attacks against trans kids. It's not going to stop, and we have to fight against it, because it's fucking gross. There are so many more important things going on than 90% of the YouTube and fucking Twitter bullshit we deal with. But this shit matters. This is going to hurt so many kids if they get this shit passed and it doesn't get fought. So just please be aware of this. Please. This shit matters. Try to educate your friends. Please educate the people you know. Find one of the articles I was just showing about the research. The next person that opens their stupid mouth and says something about, like, you know, oh, these kids should not be mutilated or that. be really clear. None of these kids go through surgery until they're over 18. Most of them don't start hormones until 16, and that's after years of therapy. I know because I've been part of this process. I'm one of the people that this shit has to go through. I'm one of the people that has to write a letter of gender-affirming care to make sure a person can get this shit. I've had to do it for mastectomies. I've had to do it for lots of stuff. This stuff matters. All right? So if you like this video, please consider liking. And if you want to see more of my content, me and Zena try to do as much as we can. I tend to stream. Zena's looking into doing certain videos for things that are really helpful for mental health. We really want to help people, and we want to make things good. We want to make a really cool community. So if you like this stuff, please consider subscribing. Ring the bell if you want to be notified, because apparently the algorithm just hates everything. The other thing I'll say is this: is if you really like the stuff we're doing, one of the things I would really appreciate is if people wanted to either join our Patreon. You can do so for $5, $30, or $50. We're going to create some more tiers at some point. But consider becoming a patron and helping us make this better, get better equipment, better stuff. It really means a lot. If you don't feel like you can do regular patronage, you can, of course, do Streamlabs. Our Streamlabs link is streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. And you can give us a one-time tip. And if you do that, I'll show you Hanging Wednesdays from a couple weeks ago. You get a cool Godzilla. If you subscribe, you get a Pikachu, right? So help us out. We're trying to make good content here. This is not my job. This is something I'm doing as a hobby and something I'm passionate about. I want to be able to do this at least enough that I don't have to necessarily take as many clients. Not that I'm going to get rid of my clients. I love them to death. But, I'd like to do this once or twice more. But I have to do that. It has to be enough to compensate for that. And we're dealing with medical issues with me and Zena. So any stuff you guys can do to help is great. And if you can't, that's okay. Just share the videos. That's huge. The How to Find a Therapist video needs more shares. It just needs them, please. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching. And I will see you in the next one.